Hi there. My name is Nigel Robinson. Thanks a lot for joining us. Welcome to Creatives Empowered, acknowledging the land modern panel discussion. We're gonna have a lot of fun today, and yeah, just stick around. We got a lot of great speakers, and we're gonna be really chopping it up on this particular topic. A little bit about me. My name is Nigel Robinson, and I'm from Cold Lake First Nations. I'm Dene Sutlane, and in Edmonton, I do a lot of community advocacy as well as I host a radio program called The Chimwen on CJSR 88.5. And I'm a humorist and I make memes and I also do a little bit of stand up comedy. But I've also spent a lot of time doing work that is about land defense and standing up for the land and our people, the indigenous people, I should say. Can we get one of those images up? I want to give you guys a little bit of a context about some of the work I do. This was out in Ecuador. I was with my friend Ariel Deranger of Indigenous Climate Action, and we went down there to witness a court case that happened between the Guarani people and the state of Ecuador. And yeah, they ended up winning that fight, and it was really a great thing to see. Can we see the next one, please? And this was in Montreal at the Global Climate Strike. We marched with Greta Thunberg, and there was, I think, over 500,000 people there, and it was about half the city. And I was a part of creating this banner and really kicking off this movement called the Land Back movement. And it started with a meme, and it just grew and got bigger from there. And now it's kind of like a slogan that a lot of us use. And yeah, these are some of the great people that we were out there with: Ellen Gabriel, Takaya Blaney, um, Denzel Wilson, a lot of really incredible leaders in our community. Next image, please. And this year was at the Art Manuel Memorial Dinner in Shakwetmakulu in Kamloops. And yeah, Art Manuel had a lot of really incredible supporters and did a lot of really important work, standing up for not only our people but the land itself. Can we see the next image, please? And this was in Ottawa at a at a big event called Power Shift, and then we had this big march where Indigenous people walked at the front, and I'm just above the little heart in the little heart on the right in this image here. And I think there's one more image, right? Can we bring that up? And this was in Spain um, at COP25, and at the time there was this huge mine called Tech Frontier Mine that was proposed for northern Alberta, and my work with some of these people here ended up getting it shut down because it was like a huge climate. Well, it was considered to be one of the biggest climate bombs that would happen in all of North America, and it ended up getting shut down as a result of this work. So yeah, I think those are all the images, and that's a little bit of the work that I do. Um, but I've slowed down a little bit on that work, and I'm more doing a lot of art projects now. And yeah, today I really want to acknowledge the fact that we all walk and breathe and live on Indigenous lands and territories. And right now, I'm calling in from Blue Quills University over here in Treaty Six territory. And this school, my family attended this residential school, and my dad came here. And today, I am one of the instructors in our language in our Department of Language, and they're doing some really badass work out here, and it's really cool to see. And yeah, I think that it's really important, this topic that we're looking at today. We're kind of getting into not only land, but how it impacts the people who live upon it, and how it influences our art and the things that we create. And our panelists today are experts and have incredible lived knowledge and lived experiences on the this particular topic. So I'm really proud to be able to come here and help moderate what's happening here. So I'll start off by giving like a just a quick intro to everyone, and then we'll go around and I'll have everyone do an introduction of themselves, and yeah, we'll launch right into it. So on our panel today, we have Tim Kenny, a master communicator. Um, and Tim Kenny is a mixed race, non-status indigenous queer man who grew up in Edmonton's community housing projects. His maternal Indigenous lineage comes from the John Baptist Gambler number 183 First Nation in Calling Lake, Alberta. And we also have Jodi Calahoo Stonehouse. She is a Cree and Mohawk from Mitchell First Nation and the current executive director of the Yellowhead Indigenous Education Foundation. She holds a BA from the Faculty of Native Studies and is completing an MSc with the Faculty of Resource Economics and Environmental Sociology at the U of A. She also works with the Edmonton Shift Lab, a social innovation lab on anti-racism, which has drawn positive attention from across the country. Is the founder of Mio Pamatsuwan Production, and also the producer and broadcaster of an award-winning Indigenous radio program called the Chimwin. That's how we met, and that's how we know each other. And it's been an honor always serving with Jodi on that show. We also have Tarene Thomas, a Indigenous artist and writer. Tarene Thomas is a Cree Gitxsan, Tahltan, and Haisla writer from Enoch Cree Nation in the northwest coast of BC. She holds a BA from the U of A and an MFA in creative writing from UBC. Her work examines the world through an Indigenous feminist lens while critiquing the institutions she works inside of. Tarene fuses together the personal and political while telling stories of sadness, joy, rebellion, and refusal. And we also have Lana Whiskeyjack. She is a multidisciplinary Treaty Iskwe scholarist from Saddle Lake Cree Nation, Treaty 6 Territory, Alberta. Guided by her grandmother's advice, go to school, travel, and see as much as you can, then return home to share what you learned, but do not forget where you came from. After graduating high school, the young mom moved to Red Deer to attain her art and design diploma, then moved to Ottawa, and her growing family attaining a BA and an MA degrees. The story continues with returning to work near her home community and attain her doctorate degree at the University of Blue Quills, the first Indigenous owned and operated educational institution in Canada. So that's a little bit about all of them, and I really want to give all of them some time to kind of introduce themselves a little bit because there's a lot that I don't know, and give your pronouns and maybe give us some of your opening thoughts on our topic today, acknowledging the land. So maybe we'll start with Tim.
Hi, everyone. Okay, needs to Aniko Matsuwanakapi, Tim Kenny, and what can I tell you about myself that already isn't in my bio, I guess? Well, I'm proudly and fiercely mixed race, non-status, indigiqueer. I choose that identity, indigiqueer, and my preferred pronouns are he, him, they, them. I choose that identity as a self-claimed identity because I don't feel aligned necessarily with the identity of Two-Spirit. And I think like indigiqueer sort of is a perfect one because I am Indigenous and I am a member, not a without getting too much into the alphabet soup of the LGBTQIA plus sort of thing. It allows me to find my pathway in there without necessarily having this identity ascribed to me. So that's what I think about that to start off. I talk a lot about where I come from. I was raised in community housing projects in poverty in Edmonton, Alberta here. Thanks to policies of colonization, my family was taken away from land and taken away from our teachings. So it's why I'm proud to have a Blackfoot name that was gifted to me this summer. It's the only Indigenous name I have. I don't speak my language because, again, of those policies of colonization. My mom was kidnapped along with her brothers and sisters in pre-60s scoop in the 1950s from their homes in northern Alberta and brought to Edmonton and then separated. And my mom was kept in a Catholic girls' home here in Edmonton for 2 years. And while her story is not mine to tell, my part of the story is that disconnection from the land and that disconnection then from our languages is what makes me a residential school survivor, I guess, in a way too, as we talk about of these intergenerational survivors that we commonly hear about or that is commonly discussed in Indigenous circles. So I'm one of those, and I grew up then without connection to my land or my language and the stories of my land. I think that's an interesting point because I always knew that I was Indigenous. There's no hiding it. I was bullied by systems my entire life that would that did their job, that made me not proud to be Indigenous, I think, for quite a few years. Most of my life, actually. I spent about 20 some odd years as a working professional hairstylist. And then I decided that that wasn't enough for me anymore. And I kept thinking about these dreams that I had when I was young. I was always born with the gift of gab, so to speak. Our people are great storytellers, aren't we? So I think I inhabit and encompass those sorts of values. I was talking long before I was walking, and I haven't shut up since. So I would say that the journey and knowing that there's something bigger for me other than just being a hairstylist is what pushed me to go to university at the age of 41. I decided that I wanted to see if I had it in me, if I was capable, and if I could possibly do some of the work to erase some of this intergenerational trauma through learning. What I didn't expect, though, through going and getting a formal university education, what I didn't expect to happen was the connection back to land that's been happening through my academic pursuits. I chose wisely to go to the First Nations Center at Mount Royal University before deciding to enroll in my program, and I did an academic upgrading program that was Indigenous based for about a year. Proud graduate of that program. I was the valedictorian that year of that program, and it's what gave me the leg up to that sets the stones in place for all of this. I decided at that point that I was going to pursue a minor in Indigenous studies when I got into my chosen program of public relations. And as I entered the public relations discipline, I don't need to tell you folks, I'm sure it's kind of the media and communications field is not very indigenized. It hasn't been very indigenized. And I uncovered that in my first day of school, basically, where I realized that I was going to be this weird anomaly. Like, I had pushback from the institutions just by wanting to declare a minor in Indigenous studies. They're like, don't you want to do a minor in maybe marketing? Maybe marketing and communications go really well together. How about English? How about this? And I'm like, no. Indigenous studies is the only thing that's going to get me through this degree is knowing who I am, where I came from, and knowing our shared histories about our people, the things I hadn't learned because I had been disconnected from land. I knew the traumas of our family, but I didn't know where I came from. So flash forward to my second year of university, and well, actually that first summer of my first official year of getting into my program after upgrading in 2015, I made a crazy decision to go on a course called Treaty 7 Field School at Mount Royal University. It's one of the few courses that I know of in the undergraduate world, especially in this region, that actually takes people out of the classroom. We spent a week learning ethnographies and histories, those sorts of things from books about the Treaty 7 nations, but then we spent a week in the field hearing traditional stories from these places. I heard the story of Nappy's Playground while standing and sitting at Nappy's Playground and hearing those stories. And what that does for you is it taps you into the frequency of the land. Not just as a visitor, you're no longer a visitor when you're hearing these stories and being gifted them. It becomes part of your DNA. And if you're Indigenous, it just activates some sort of frequency, like these little bubbles that just start activating in you. In that same summer, we ended up at Akokutsin at the Kainai First Nation, or the Bloods, and we were gifted the rare honor of watching one of the sacred societies, the Horn Society, dance out on their first day. It was a little bit of a crazy experience getting there. That's a story for another day. But I do know that while I was there, I said a prayer. I was feeling really conflicted being a mixed race Cree Métis man in hostile Blackfoot territory, and being gifted these amazing experiences and having my frequencies open up and everything like bubbling up and tapping up in me, but also realizing that I didn't have the connection back to my own people. And I said a prayer, a really deep prayer that day, and asked for Creator to help me connect all these oppositions that I was feeling, all these polarities and dualities. The duality of being a mixed race man in enemy territory, so to speak, if we're looking back at history, and also being in a profession that was designed to market hegemony, market mainstream thought. And it was a really conflicting place for me to be in. And I said that prayer and I walked away from that field school that summer. And within about 2 months, I had Cowboy Smith on my phone asking me if I would be crazy enough to take on a role of being the head of communications for an Indigenous organization that he was starting called Red Talks. Red
Mm-hmm.
Talks is based in the Anitsi Treaty Arts Society. And that Anitsi Treaty Arts Society, Anitsi is a Blackfoot word that closely relates to, I guess, the meaning of treaty. So how we all make relationships with each other. So Red Talks was more than just a bunch of speakers and a TEDx talk style, which if you've seen some of the videos, some people might just think it's that. There was a lot more to it than that. There was ceremony. There was acknowledging of the land. There was calls to ceremony before each of those Red Talks, and it was rooted in ceremony. And I can't help but think that my experience of praying on the land months before, like, just sort of activated into something that happened a few months later. And Red Talks had its own life. It did its own thing, and it was like a buffalo charging just through the plains. And I was simply there to help birth it and hang on tight while the ride was pretty wild.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that throughout all of that, it's led me to understand how the work I do as an Indigenous communicator has to be connected to lands. Even though I've been on this disconnection or this cord cut from my family and my stories, my academic pursuits have been making me think about those things more and bringing me back. So it's no accident then that this summer I decided, well, last spring, actually, I was looking for a master's program to do, and I couldn't find any that were seeming to fit. And I almost gave up entirely and decided I wasn't going to do a master's. And one of my teachers from my alma mater actually insisted that I talk to another Indigenous communicator she knew that was in a program at UC, in the Masters of Ed in Interdisciplinary Studies. This Masters of Ed at the Workland School of Education, where I'm currently taking my master's now. They have lots of different modules that you can take in this Masters of Ed Interdisciplinary. It's part-time, it's course-based, so it suits being a working professional, but they have Blackfoot modules. And so it was a chance for me to go deeper than what I did in Treaty 7 field school, as I'm been returning to the land since the summer and getting land-based teachings involved in ceremony, going to sacred places and hearing ceremony, uncovering pieces of myself again, and forced to look at that disconnection, that me being disconnected from the land by returning to the land. And then through
Mm-hmm.
returning to the land, it's making me realize that my work is it, this is this is not me. This is creator's path. This has always been creator's path, probably set in motion, I think, long before I said that prayer at Akokatsin in 2015. But it is happening now, and I am returning to the land habitually, repeatedly. I'm involving myself in more ceremony than I've ever been. I'm more involved in rituals that sustain me. Like, what gets me up every morning is smudging. I have to. Before, I used to use smudging as just a tool, and smudging from sacred medicines from the land, and the stories and blessings and prayers that have been on those medicines that are fusing through me every morning where I return, so that I can just do the work that I need to do and hope that Creator is continuing to set me in motion into the places that I need to be. I constantly ask Creator to move me. I'm your vessel. Use me as you will and put me in the places that I am supposed to be. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
that means land-based education while figuring out how I can fight back against a system that seemed hostile to me at first, not very indigenized, and figuring out how maybe I might one day want to indigenize the field of public relations, communications, media studies, and where my role in that is. Also, while I still work at the federal government and making sure that I still continue to work on projects where I can throw my passion and make sure that I'm not just being tokenized and that our voice, the voice of our people, is being heard. So I tend to try to gravitate towards projects and files that actually I feel like make a difference and where I have a chance to input things. So I've worked on things like Indigenous words, like through leaning on tools like this. I don't know if everybody can see that. I'll back up a little bit, but this is one of my favorite books. I constantly, if I get a chance, and anybody asks me what you can do as a communicator to indigenize the profession, is learn about words, learn about the power of words. Language comes from the land. All of our Indigenous languages are rooted back to land-based, place-based, ceremony, things that directly applied into our lives. So it's no accident that words have also the English word have meaning and power too. And I think we need to bring the power back in them by looking at what words we choose when we're writing about us. And
Absolutely.
when we're writing about ourselves, and also when we're letting other people write about this. So this book was written by an Indigenous publisher who passed away. I always had a dream of working with him to like maybe expand on this a little bit, but this book has guidelines such as the history of the portrayal of Indigenous peoples in literature, to cultural rights of Indigenous people, culturally appropriate publishing practices, a terminology guide, because lots of people ask me about terminology. As a
Mhm.
communicator, you can get into this potato, capital I Indigenous versus small I Indigenous. That's one of the first fights I had in my program. Was I wanted to capitalize I, but the Canadian Press Style Guide hadn't gotten to that point yet, and it still had Indigenous as a small I, and fighting with my instructor to be like, no, this press release I'm writing like capital I. No, 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 Canadian Press Style says like small I. So those little things, those little microaggressions, I suppose, so to speak, made me realize that I was in a field, in a profession that isn't very indigenized at all. Sure, there's lots of
Mhm.
Indigenous journalists and stuff that we've seen now come to the forefront since I started my work, and I'm pleased about that, but we have a long ways to go. And indigenous people we need to really, really harness and think about these things.
Thank you, Tim.
So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Right on. Thanks a lot for kicking us off, Tim. Can we move on over to Jodi?
Thank you, Nigel. Hi, Nanaskaman. It's good to be here with these beautiful, extraordinary women who I love and adore. Lana and Tarene, I'm big fans of both of you. Nice to meet you, Tim. And Nigel, as always, lots of love to you. And Shivani, hi, for all of your work lifting BIPOC, queer folks who are doing extraordinary things. You know, when we think about acknowledging the land, for me, I just go right back to being a little girl, and my safe place, my happy place was with my mushum. And he brought me on the trap line when I was, 7 years old, 8 years old. And so my foundations of being a little girl, my safe place, growing, developing, learning, were on the land. And so everything I do, whether it's artistic, whether it's political, all of the work that I embody is rooted in my connection with the land, my berry picking, my fishing, my hunting, my walking. And, as an indigenous person of these lands, my family came from Ganawage. They were La Voyageurs, canoemen. And so the waterways are really significant, powerful, meaningful, loving ways of transporting ourselves around in these territories. So I love that we're talking about this, and I want to make space for the rest of our collectives to talk and have some engagement. So thank you for inviting me to be here.
Thank you, Jodi. We'll send it over to Tarene.
Tansai, everyone, thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see all of your faces and share this virtual space together. I'm zooming in from the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. I am from Muskegsic Cree Nation. I grew up in Enoch. I moved here to Vancouver about 3 years ago to pursue a master's degree. So I just finished that. It's my project is called Rationing Sweetgrass, and I got to work with Billy Ray Belcourt as my thesis advisor. So that was a dream. So right now I'm splitting my time between Treaty 6 and Vancouver. I guess a bit I could talk about my connection to land started very young. My dad would always take me hunting as a kid, me and my siblings. And I also have family up north here in BC, the Gitxsan folks, Gitxsan territory. I spend my summers in the smokehouse and along the Skeena River. So a lot of my writing, I'm writing about the water, I'm writing about the salmon, and I'm writing about our connection to the lands and our inherent rights as Indigenous people to be on the lands and our responsibility to protect these lands. So that's a bit about me and my work. I'll pass it on to the next.
Awesome. Thank you, Tarene. And to round us out, we'll send it over to Lana.
Danse kakianawagamaaganak, Lana Whiskeyjack Nitsigasa, no Nixkaponitsekotinia. But first and foremost, Nia Sinu Oma Otsieski. I am a human of this earth. And I think about that as, my connection to the land, of being reminded, as Tim mentioned, the importance of our words. And so being a human of this land first, and of course, I am from Sad Lake Cree Nation. My belly button connections come from there. Treaty 6 territory, but I live here in Amiskitsi, Whiskeyjack. I'm assistant professor in the Women's and Gender Studies at the University of Alberta. I often like to call myself a skull artist because I'm also an artist, visual storyteller. I do paintings, was trained in sculpting, ceramic sculpting, but picked up painting and photography and then digital storytelling during my doctorate program at Blue Quills. Thinking about the land, thinking about my Otsi connections, I think about Nokompa and Caroline Whiskeyjack, who was my greatest rock-in teacher about connecting to the land, because she was medicine picker, rock picker. She used to clear out a lot of the settler lands around Sad Lake. But when we're back at home and in the reserve, going to pick medicines, she would take off her shirt. And I think about rematuration and how, she was that matriarchal rock who really taught me about connecting to the land in that way, and our bodies being inherently connected to this land. And so, thinking of her walking in the bush, shirtless, cooking, picking medicines, I think about that comfort, that confidence, that courage of not being threatened when we're on our land, when we belong to this land. And so, hi, Ninaskumo, Nistamina, Nimiwait, and I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you, Lana. Thanks a lot to everyone for your opening thoughts and ideas. I want to keep it rolling with Lana for a moment. Lana has a body of work that is like so connected to land and and kind of really deeply considers connection to the land. And I asked Lana a question yesterday that I kind of want to get back to now that she's had some time to think about it. What kind of kicked off your work with really investing and figuring out reconnecting to the land? Like, why are you, what propelled you to do that?
Yeah.
And also of course, please tell us a little bit about some of your projects. I know that you have some images and of your art that you'd like to show.
I think you might have one with Mother in residential school. We can begin with just looking at that image. When I was working on my doctorate at Blue Quills, looking at intergenerational trauma and looking at the disconnections, I wanted to transform those disconnections to the land, to the language, to our laws of the land, to our Utsi connections, because we've seemed to forget about the importance of our grandmother's teachings, especially our Mother Earth teachings. And so this was really about that transforming and that narrative around that, from disconnections to reconnecting to our land. And really it's that reconnection to the land was about coming back into owning our stories, being the authors of our own stories, telling those stories. And so another image I'd like to share is the heartberry strawberry moon. This is from a recent series of exploring Kisiguan, the 13 moons. And it's about, again, as Esquelwak, reclaiming our governance and leadership of this land by seeing our time, our moon time, or as we say in Cree, we go on, of being with our grandmothers and returning to those teachings of the land. So the more I connect to the language, Nehiawewen, the more I realize how important, that reconnection to the land is also through the language, our Cree language, the languages of this land. And so this is really, when I think about, women reclaiming their bodies and their stories and their medicines, that we're coming back to this place of reclaiming our own autonomy and sovereignty of our bodies. So been working on that all my life. Hi.
Right on. Thank you very much, Lana. Yeah, there's just something that really changes when you kind of get on the land and start to really kind of experience it in a way that you might not have before. I have had the experience of, and maybe in the past 5 years, I've taken hunting a lot more seriously, and just getting out there and getting an animal, and then spending 3 or 4 days lovingly working with an animal on its hide, on the meat, on the grinding, and saying prayers for those animals. It connects you to your environment in a way that is very different from what you can experience, like if you're kind of city bound like I was for a lot of my youth. I have a, similar youth. I have a similar, yeah, like young person experience to Tim in some ways, because I was stuck in the city, and it was hard because I had a single mother and I didn't have access to a man in my life, or like hunters in my life who could take me out and kind of connect in those ways. So yeah, Tim was talking a little bit about kind of trying to bring some indigenization into the world of communication. Tim, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I think the journey is basically just being me right now, going through the process and continuing to return to the land for my studies and learning all that it gives me. It's done things for me like this, and this is a tool of communication. Story robes. This was an assignment that we had to do recently for school, and I mean, that was a deep journey. So just continuing to do things like this, and I think maybe this ends in me creating a land-based curriculum for communicators one day, where I take communication and media professionals onto the land once I get my master's. We'll see how that goes up.
Right on. Thank you, Tim. Yeah. Like just the process of making it, like, I have worked on hides from front to back, and there's so much work that goes into it, and then you have to pick up something to like draw something on it. That idea just horrifies me. But I completely respect it. Tarene, you have just graduated from years and years in school. Um, what's the plan now? And like, also huge congratulations. Everyone here is very excited about it.
Yeah, thank you. So I actually just got in my PhD application, so I'm not getting off this train yet. But right now I'm working on getting my first manuscript of poetry published. I'm just kind of shopping around, seeing which publishing house would be best fit for me. I would like to find folks who don't want to censor or change any of the work that I've done, because I write a lot in Cree, and I also do a lot of writing about being on the land and doing salmon with my family every summer, and how that's become, when I go out and spend time in the smokehouse, that kind of becomes almost like a writing workshop for me from the land in itself. A lot of my writing comes from spending time with my elders and in the community and being on the land, and the types of stories that are talked about when you spend time on the land. When you're out in the bush, or when you're up on the river, or you're on a canoe, different types of stories will arise. And so I'm trying to find a place and a space that will nurture that work in a good way, which is difficult. So I'm just trying to figure that out right now. I'm starting to work on a couple of different projects. I actually just finished a project with Full Circle here in Vancouver, along with Joshua Jackson and a bunch of other really amazing artists. It was called the Kayachtan Project, where we went out with Squamish elders on the canoe. And we went on this canoe journey, and we let that journey kind of guide a bit of artistic process. I wrote a couple poetry pieces, and there were other folks who worked on other live performance and performance arts, which was amazing because I had never been on a canoe on the ocean before, and to be welcomed with open arms from the host nation to experience the land in that way was such a beautiful project. So that was a lot of fun. And right now I'm kind of enjoying not being in university for the first time in 9 years. I feel a little lost. I'm like, what am I going to do? I guess I can read my books that I've been telling myself I'm going to read for the past 6-8 months. But yeah, I'm kind of just figuring it out day by day.
Right on. Thank you, Tarene. Yeah, I got the opportunity once to travel with the Wild Salmon Caravan out in BC, and they're a collective that kind of just goes to many different communities and really tries to push that that Indigenous foods are critical. And it's an incredible project. I'd advise you all to check it out. And I have such massive respect for every family that like puts in the gargantuan effort to work on salmon and fish and traditional foods. And for myself, it was a huge hurdle to get into hunting and fishing. But I'm very fortunate that in Cold Lake we have a lot of great fishermen and a lot of really fantastic hunters. So yeah, Tareen, I'm totally there with you with out there smoking fish, but in Cold Lake it's whitefish. But yeah, it's a really cool. Do you want to talk more about your guys' big your big family project of doing salmon?
Yeah, it's quite the process. It's a lot of work. So we're out there pretty much every day, dusk to dawn, out in the back. So first you have to clean out the smokehouse. So everything has to come out. Me and my granny will take all of the poles and we'll scrub them down. The boys have to go get cottonwood. It's really a whole family effort. It's not something that one person can do on their own. And then we have kind of like a factory line. My uncles will set up the tents, and then we have a big cooler for all of the wild salmon. And then it's somebody's job to come out, grab the fish, and then gut it. And then it's somebody's job to either cut it up, take the spine out. But there's all different types of ways to preserve the fish. We usually save smoking the fish for the last few days, or try to wait for some rainy weather, because it gets really hot, and the hotter it gets, the grumpier people get, and the more little arguments can come out. That's another funny thing. Me and my dad will always get into an argument at least once or twice, maybe more, before the week is done. And then everybody will kind of laugh at us. But it's fun, and it's really warm. I'm actually allergic to bees. So I got this bee tattoo to make peace with the bees. So hopefully they don't sting me as often or as much, but I'll take pepper and I'll put pepper all over my skin to kind of keep the bees and the wasps away. What else could I say? After we're done our fish, we always take a drive out to Prince Rupert as a family to celebrate, and we spend time on the ocean, and we go have fish and chips. And it's really become like a ritual every year after year. It's the last week of July, the first week of August that the salmon come, and that we go do our fish camp. I think something else that's really beautiful to see is my little sister. She's been doing it since she was about 7 or 8 years old, and seeing her little hands. Well, I guess not so little anymore. She's a little teenager now, but seeing her growing up doing that, it just makes me feel really happy to be able to be gifted that opportunity. Is really important.
I know what you mean, Tarene. I've had the opportunity to take out some of my younger cousins hunting, and for them to be able to like get their hands in some guts at like 12 years old, um, they don't know how much we would have loved to have done that. It's so critical. And yeah, it just like, it just brings tears to your eyes to see your younger relatives be able to just access those kind of things. And that's the kind of work that everyone here does to make sure that that can happen. Like I think all of us would have benefited a lot from having access to such things as children. I'm lucky that I was able to go to my relative Alex Jambier's sweat ever since I was a kid, but the hunting in my family kind of got cut off after my grandpa, so my dad didn't get to learn, and then I didn't get to learn. But in my 20s, I was able to pick it back up, which was really great. Um, I want to move over to Jodi. Jodi has taken on a lot of work in the world of leadership in the last few years. And I know Jodi quite intimately. We have been in ceremony together, and we ran a radio program together for a number of years. And, one of the things that always concerns me about leadership in the, so-called Canada is that most of them, they don't have the kind of relationship with the land that we do as Indigenous people, being hunters and fishers and ceremony people who participate in all of these things. Um, Jodi, what do you think of that? How are you bringing in like your world into politics? Because this is like, um, it's almost like there's a jarring gap between the two.
Absolutely, there's a jarring gap, and the climate crisis is evident of the jarring gap, between politics and the land. And so, I see my work being around how do I warmly invite those into seeing the world differently. I mean, if we think about colonialism and capitalism, it's about exploitation and consumerism and individual gain and property. And it's an entire group of systems that actually deplete the land over time. And so here we are in a climate crisis in Alberta, where we now have to make some decisions around how we're going to do things differently. And it's uncomfortable and it's unfavorable for many, many folks, as we have generations of families who've done things in a particular way, and it's hard to change. It's people are resistant, and I understand that. But more importantly, as a woman who was blessed to be on the land, I also see the degradation. I see the watershed that I grew up on, trapping beavers and smoking fish. We can't anymore. The nitrogen level is so high in the watershed here at Lac St. Anne and the Sturgeon River that it's not healthy to eat the fish. The methyl mercury levels in the North Saskatchewan River, right here through our beautiful city, the water that we drink that comes out of our tap. I mean, my connection reminds me every day when I walk in the river valley, this is the water, the medicine, the muskiki, the napi that nurtures my body and all of the land. So when I'm sitting in a house or at the house, or when I'm sitting wherever around policy and legislation, I bring all of me. I bring my ancestors with me. I bring those yet unborn, those faces we haven't seen with me. And so I think the more we can encourage our young people to think about politics, to think about leadership, because we bring our whole selves to those places. And it's not easy, because we're having to contend with a worldview that isn't necessarily our worldview. And so we have to walk in both worlds. And elders have said that to us, learning to walk in both worlds. And we have to be able to invite others into our world so that we can build this relationship of love and connection to make good choices for future generations. So That's what I think. And staying connected in ceremony and elders, because they will tell me when I step out of line.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they will. They certainly will. Um, I know that a lot of our people are a lot of people on this call right now are connected to ceremony and are very lucky to be so. Um, and I think that, you know, being a part of a sweat lodge family or a Sundance family is a very important thing. And you know, when you're doing the work to prepare a ceremony, or you're in ceremony or after a ceremony, um, so much work goes into it, and you learn values and you learn skills that you would not have learned otherwise. And it's very important that our people have access to such things. So one thing that I would really like to encourage is, you know, if you're an Indigenous person who is watching this, if you can become connected to ceremony, do so. Do so. It can really help you out. And access is very hard sometimes. So those of you who are connected to ceremony and you have a friend of yours who has never gotten to experience these kind of things, you know, see if you can invite them out. It's really important that we be able to give access to our community members to access ceremony, and even like just to go out hunting or fishing. These kind of things are really important. Um, we're already coming to down to like the last 10 or so minutes of our chat here today. So I really want to like speedball it now and check in with each and every one of you and see if we can like hammer out some good conclusions and take homes for all the folks watching at home and on their lunch breaks. So let's send it around. I want to hear all of you guys. I want to hear from everyone. Um, Maybe some things we can take away, and some good maybe lessons that we have learned from this discussion, and maybe maybe an invitation to learn more. Um, so whoever wants to go first, go ahead and take it away. I'm hoping that we can get some good information for our people and for them to be able to have some continued learning in the future. Tarene,
I'll
you look like. Oh, Tim, you want to start?
might as well. If you're communicating and you're a communicator out there and you communicate for Indigenous arts organizations, or you communicate on behalf of Indigenous people, for Indigenous people, by Indigenous people, with Indigenous people, you got to get out of your office. You got to get to the land. It's just as simple as that. And I don't know, the accessibility thing is going to be sure an issue, but if you come humbly and you're non-Indigenous and you come humbly, I can tell you that people will welcome you with open arms. There's opportunities everywhere. But to communicate by us, for us, with us, about us, you have to get to the land. Simple as that.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, absolutely.
I think one thing that I've really been thinking about a lot these past few years being are occupying space and occupying territory that isn't my traditional territory. I've struggled a bit with lack of access to my own territories when I'm over here. So one thing that I've been learning and constantly having to remind myself is that I can still be connected to the land while in an urban center like Vancouver or like Edmonton. You know, access is a really big problem. So I just want to share with folks that you can still access the land while being in the city. You know, you can go down to the river, you can go to a park, you can walk down to the ocean, go put your feet on into the snow, into the dirt, wherever you are, the land is there. And it's difficult to feel connected sometimes when we're in these urban spaces and urban centers, and often we could feel like we're not connected or we don't have access. But yeah, I just want to remind you that anywhere you are, the land is there, and you can have access to that land.
Thank you, Tarene.
Just to follow up on that, I think I have another image of a kukum here in Edmonton, a painting. Wanted to share that. Thank you. This is Benasco Bisum. It's the leaf following moon for my 13 moons paintings. And this is just imagining, you know, land back. This is about reconnecting, you know, that to our art practices, our art as being ceremonies, going back and being able to, again, have access to the land, to be able to express who we are as Aisinuak, of beings of this land. And not too far from this space, we actually had a moon lodge, which called the Heartland, just down from Kinsman. It was probably, who knows, but maybe it was the first moon lodge since, the settlement of Whiskeyjack, and just being able to, again, have ceremonies. We pitched our teepee, had this moon lodge of, all of us, Esquelwa coming in and praying and learning about our traditional rites of passage as Esquelwa. So Edmonton has an Indigenous strategic framework of being able to, again, support these kind of initiatives. And so I'm sure Jodi, as a, political leader, could share more about that.
Well, I'll leave with a little bit of hope, Lana. We're at Kitchiaski down in the River Valley. We're working with IKWC, the Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center. And we're going to start our very first land-based education site. So we're going to have 4-year-olds on the land doing magical, wonderful things. And over time, we'll grow the program, grade 1, grade 2. So it'll be a land-based education space. And because as Indigenous people, we're rooted in anti-racism. When we sat with the commissioners and the settlers, it was about welcoming and loving and embracing as treaty relatives. And so our job is to remind folks who sit with us on these lands how to act as relatives. So those children, whether they're settler or newcomers, are welcome to join and learn the Cree language, learn from a land-based perspective, because our sustainability as human beings on this planet really, really is rooted in how we live sustainably, how we live on the land. And so inviting children to learn to think about the planet differently, inviting children to get their hands dirty and to get muddy and to create art and beautiful things with fish scales and hides, for me, are the way that we move forward as a collective. So I'm really excited that we're doing that. We're going to be launching in September. So things are happening. We're transforming the way we do things. And everyone keep going, keep doing the work you're doing. And Lana, your art, it just moves me so much. I was like, oh, I want that piece of the cookum in the city doing hide scraping. Because that's what we have to do. We have to scrape the hides in the city. We have to hold the lodges. All the land is sacred everywhere. Tarene says, go to the ocean, walk in the river valley, do it. Every day, make time, because then we will all make better decisions about our bodies, about the environment, and whether we're in leadership or in our day-to-day lives. When we are connected to our mother, we are connected to ourselves, and we're connected to each other.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jodi. Wow, a lot of really great final statements. Thank you so much, everyone. Real quick, right at the end here, can everyone do their plugs and socials? I want people to be able to find you, connect with you, see what you guys are working on. If you guys have anything you want to plug, or if you just want to give us your socials so that people can stay connected with you and continue to take in your guys' story, that'd be great. So maybe we'll start with Tim again.
Okay, I'm trying to remember what I have. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at TechCom44. I don't know, Twitter's dying. You can find me on Instagram, Matsawanakapi, Timothy Kenny. Same thing on Facebook.
Thanks, Tim. Let's send it over to Tarene.
I predominantly use Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at Rephoria, REPHORIA.
Awesome. Thank you, Tarene. And we'll send it over to Lana.
You can find me on Instagram, Lana Whiskeyjack, Facebook, Lana Whiskeyjack. I also have a website, lanawhiskeyjack.ca, and YouTube channel, Lana Whiskeyjack. Thank you.
Awesome. Nice and simple. Jodi.
And you have a YouTube channel. You're really famous. That's amazing. You can find me, Jodi Calahoo Stonehouse. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You know what's interesting? My kid said to me the other day, they're like, Facebook is like the book of the dead. And I was like, So I guess it really ages me. Yes, I'm still on Facebook and all of the other platforms. And thank you, Nigel, for hosting us. This was really great. I'm inspired. Each of you were amazing. I love you all.
Thank you very much, Jodi. And yeah, I am so sorry that we could only run this for an hour. I feel like we got another hour of talk that we could do. But please follow Creatives Empowered on the socials. Membership is free for Indigenous, Black, and BIPOC folks. And yeah, if you can, get out to the land in a good and kind way. Thanks again to Tim and Jodi and Lana and Tarene. It is such an honor for us to be able to take in your guys' wisdom and your lived experiences and all of your knowledge. There is so much more that we can talk about, and take a look at this. Take a look at the webpage again, and maybe tomorrow. I want to be able to grab all of the things that everyone shared and pop them into the link so that you guys can read all the books. You guys can check out all the poetry, and you guys can kind of further your education. But yeah, Creatives Empowered is looking to do more of these talks in the future. So please stick around and check out their work. And yeah, you guys, if you can get out to the land and experience a greater connection to place, I encourage you all to do that. So,
And I just
Masicho,
want to add, Nigel, before we go, I want to add to our viewers in Edmonton, the Kitchia ski site, which is managed by the Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center, IKWC, will be open to all folks. So whether you're Indigenous or not, or you're new to these lands, it will be a beautiful place and space for people to hold ceremony. So if you want to experience a sweat or a feast, or want to pray with an elder or be on the land, there's beautiful traditional ochre sites there. People are welcome. We finally have a place as Indigenous people to hold our ceremonies and prayers in the city. I mean, if you look around the country, there's mosques, there's churches, but Indigenous people haven't had a place and space, and now we do. So please contact IKWC in Edmonton and join us, pray with us, feast with us. It's going to be amazing. So things are changing.
Absolutely, Jodi. And that's a great point. To all the Indigenous folks out there who may be watching, Indigenous people have so much to offer, and so many people don't have access to Indigenous people, or may learn untrue things about Indigenous people. So, I would challenge you all to think about those perceptions that you may have, and maybe start with talking to an Indigenous person or read an Indigenous author. There's so much that we have to offer as a people. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining us. Please check out Kihuaski and all of the other things that our panelists have discussed. And yeah, may you all get out and be able to spend some time on the land. Even if it's cold out, just throw on a jacket. So Masicho, thank you so much. Thank you to Creatives Empowered and Shivani and the whole team. And yeah, tune back in the future, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of other great stuff to share. Masi.